Greetings, friends and brethren. It's past midnight here in East Europe. Greetings to all of you from East Europe. I have sad news in one sense, but also the exciting news in the other on the other hand. And I thought I wanted to share this with you because the news does refer to the strategic port city of Mariupol. And you might remember that since my first audio recording to you, I've predicted that the city of Mariupol would be suffering the greatest loss as far as civilians are concerned and as far as the infrastructure of the city is concerned. I need to give you once again just to remind you of this city of Mariupol. The city of Mariupol is basically located on the Azov Sea, which is also part of the Black Sea. It was a strategic port through which the Ukrainian export was going, from that city out to the world. It's a city that is a Russian-speaking city, by the way. Even though the population was very interesting, it is a city that goes has a very long history. A beautiful city where the equal number of Russians and Ukrainians lived. There was a slight majority of Ukrainians. Nevertheless, in the city there was a significant Greek community that also is very ancient there and has a very long history of its presence in that area. And the very last diplomat who left the city of Mariupol was the Greek consul, who already said that the city was devastated already. The city is also part of the Russian populated area of Donbas, even though one part of it kind of leans against the Ukrainian mainland. But nevertheless, it was a Russian-speaking city, a Russophile city. And back in 2014, when the Crimea declared, Crimeans on referendum declared that they no longer wanted to stay in Ukraine because they were given to the Ukraine during the communist regime of the 20th century, and Crimea was never really a Ukrainian country or a Ukrainian area. It was an area populated by the Russians anyway, mostly by the Russians as well as the other communities. In any case, in 2014, the Ukrainian government forces basically fortified themselves within the city of Mariupol because they realized its strategic position. And besides, they were trying to prevent Mariupol basically falling or joining the Russian-speaking areas and falling into the Russian hands earlier. Now, what happened during this conflict when Ukraine was attacked by Russia during this special operation, the city of Mariupol was completely besieged by the Russian forces. Completely besieged by the Russian forces, and it was very, very obvious to any common sense person that since the very beginning of the conflict, the city of Mariupol was going to fall into the Russian hands sooner or later. The only problem was that within the city there were 400,000 civilians trapped because the Ukrainian Neo-Nazi Azov Battalion, the horrible Azov Battalion, go and Google about it if you wish. The Azov Battalion, that was the main Ukrainian government forces within the city, did not want to allow the civilians to leave the city itself. In fact, there was a communication from the Ukrainian government that was intercepted by the Russian forces, and the instruction from the Ukrainian government in Kiev was hold on to the city, use the civilians as a shield against the Russians, and if you have to die as martyrs, but don't lay down the arms. It was last Monday, exactly a week ago. It was last Monday that the Russians gave the ultimatum to the Ukrainian forces within the city. Again, Russians completely beleaguered that city. Completely. There was no way that the city would not fall into the Russian hands sooner or later. Any common sense person could see that. And even though the Russians hated the neo-Nazism, and even though the neo-Nazis were fortified in the city, the Russian forces gave them the ultimatum until 5 a.m. last Monday, telling them basically this: lay down your arms, put the arms down, we're going to let you free. We're going to let you free. We're just going to, go home and just surrender the city over to our hands, and that'll be it. No, the Ukrainian government forces, of course, did not want to do that. The Ukrainian central government also imposed a Ukrainian as a mayor of that city. And the Ukrainian government forces did not want to give up. So basically, since they were pushed to the central parts of the Mariupol, from the outskirts to the central parts, basically the street fights were happening. And finally, I've just received the news, I've just checked the news right now. Well, sometimes on Monday, that will be March 28th, sometimes in the afternoon, the city of Mariupol has fallen into the Russian hands, and the city of Mariupol is now controlled completely by the Russian forces. I don't know what kind of propaganda you will be hearing from the Western media, but that propaganda is totally one-sided. That propaganda is hiding the truth as it is. That propaganda keeps telling you that the Ukrainians are having a heroic resistance and that the Russian forces have been almost basically stopped at all. No. Dear friends, dear brethren, that's not the truth. Yes, there is the resistance by the Ukrainians, of course, that's for sure. But however, there is no way, I've been telling you this since the beginning of this conflict, there is no way that Ukraine can ever win Russia. There is simply no way. So yes, they can perhaps hold Russians for a while in certain areas. They can perhaps defend whatever city, like this city of Mariupol, which they kept in their hands, for far too long. They could do that, but there is no way they can win over Russia. There is no way. It's just a common sense. Even the Western governments do understand that, because nobody dares even enter into an open conflict with Russia. Nobody dares. Now, the city of Mariupol, beautiful as it was, multi-ethnic as it was, with a significant, again, Greek community there, with an equal number of Russians and Ukrainians, with some other minorities like Bulgarians, Jews, Belarus, etc. The city of Mariupol was something that these Ukrainian Nazis are responsible for all the suffering of the citizens. I think so far perhaps about 100,000 citizens might remain within the city, but the city was completely cut off. It was completely cut off by the Russian forces, and it was completely cut off from the rest of the world. And of course there was lack of everything, lack of food, lack of water, lack of medicine, lack of electricity, lack of gas, and so on. So the suffering of the city of Mariupol is just something that grieves me so terribly. And since the beginning of this conflict, you might remember me always pointing out to you that that city was going to suffer most, and that to me it'll be a deep wound on my Slavic heart, because the two Slavic nations went to war with one another, and it is very sad throughout the Slavic history how the Slavic people have been at odds with one another, because they would always serve somebody else. Somebody else was always more important. NATO, European Union, Germans, Americans, whatever. The Slavs sadly have never achieved any decent, significant, dignified unity between one another. Now, the city of Mariupol was strategic because it is also part of the land corridor that the Russian forces would establish between the Donbas, the two Russian populated areas in East Ukraine, and also the Crimean Peninsula. So now Russians have consolidated their territory, and sometimes it was on Saturday, Sunday, that the Russian forces declared that the first phase, the first stage of their military operations, as they call it, in Ukraine was over, and now that the second phase has begun. Now, part of this second phase obviously was that one of these days the city of Mariupol had to fall into their hands, because it's a strategic city, and the Russians could never allow a Ukrainian pocket to, Mariupol to be a Ukrainian pocket out of which the Ukrainians would be attacking the Russian populated areas. I want to now give you a quote. I'm hearing the evening news, the Serbian Daily, and I just want to quote to you I just want to quote to you the most relevant things. It's here before me in Serbian language, and I'll just try to kind of give you the most important details. Forgive me again, I'm kind of very shaken. I'm very shaken, and of course English is not my native tongue as well. I'm very shaken because I'm so grieved that a beautiful city like this has fallen and has been destroyed as the result of irrationality. I just wish if on the Ukrainian side there was rational thinking, if you see that no European country will come to your aid, if you see that the United States is not going to come to your aid, if you see that you're basically by yourself and you're now faced with, nevertheless, however justified or unjustified it is, but it was justified because for years, the ethnic Russians in Ukraine have been enduring all kinds of oppressions, all kinds of violation of their human rights. But however you might think that Russian intervention is justified or not, well, one thing is for sure. Ukraine by itself, and even with the help of others, but Ukraine by itself for sure is no match to Russian military might. So, even with the resistance it might provide against the Russians, sooner or later, the Ukraine will be completely conquered. That's brethren and friends, that's a common sense. That's just a common sense. And any common sense person, I consider myself to be a common sense person. Any common sense person could see that, could foresee that, could perceive that, and could conclude clearly that will be the case. Nevertheless, the Ukrainian central government forces insisted on holding out to Russian attacks on Mariupol, and even though Mariupol was completely beleaguered by the Russians, there was no humanitarian aid was able to enter Mariupol because Russians controlled all the roads to Mariupol. And the only thing that remained for the Ukrainian government forces was to basically fortify within the city and kind of, provide some kind of resistance until they would be all either conquered or killed or whatever. The Russians, again, a week ago, the Russians gave them an ultimatum. Just put down your arms, surrender the city to us and you're free to leave. No, they didn't want that. So now the city has fallen it would be like on Monday in the afternoon, has fallen by that time by about 5 p.m. The city, or 6 p.m. the city has fallen into the Russian hands. The mayor of Mariupol, Vadim Boychenko, has declared yesterday around in the afternoon that his town, his city, is in the hands of the Russian military. I'm just going to now quote his statement. Not everything is within our power. Unfortunately, today we are in the hands of the occupiers, he said in a television interview, which was shown publicly. The television interview. So that's it. They call the Russians occupiers, but again, the city of Mariupol is a Russian-speaking city, by the way. It was unclear whether there were still some fights going on within the city, but he also mentioned, the mayor, that its complete evacuation of the town is still necessary. Now, the complete evacuation, it does make sense because the city has been destroyed. The city has been destroyed. There is, again, as I said, there's lack of food, lack of water, lack of everything. And I think, hopefully, one of these days, the beautiful city would be rebuilt. Hopefully, we might see again a beautiful port city of Mariupol. I hope so. Also, it has been on Twitter. The one of the Chechenian battalions. There's a photo of Chechen fighters in Mariupol. Here they are with the Russian flag, and here they are. They have just taken a photo in the Mariupol. And that means that they've entered the city and they've taken control over the city. That's one short article from Mariupol. But however, the other one is so terrible The other article says about what the neo-Nazis, Ukrainian neo-Nazis, done into the city. And it says the crimes of Nazis in Mariupol revealed the Russian military in the cellars or basements found bodies that were brutally tortured, bodies of the brutally tortured civilians. And here is what the Serbian Evening News says. In the cellars or basements of the liberated apartment buildings in Mariupol, the Russian army has found the bodies of civilians. There were traces of torture on those bodies, and on their skin, the neo-Nazis cut the Nazi symbols. And this is the statement from the head of the Center for Control of National Defense of the Russian Federation, and the statement from Colonel General Mikhail Mizintsev. And then there is this photo of devastated buildings of Mariupol. And then there is one Twitter announcement. And there is a body of a person. I cannot see whether it's male or female. But right here on his, it's a male obviously, on his chest there is a swastika being cut into his body. So, I feel so sorry because I felt that the Mariupol, as I've been telling you, will be the city that would suffer the most in this conflict. And I knew that because the horrible Azov Battalion, which is a neo-Nazi formation, was stationed in that city. And I also knew that the Russians had to take the city because it's strategic and it does provide a land corridor between the Russian populated areas, and it's also an important, very important city. Which is again, by taking this city, they've given another blow to the Ukrainian economy, because again, Mariupol was the strategic port out of where various goods and commodities were exported from Ukraine to the other countries in the world. And here, I'm just going to read from this article a bit more. It says, in the basements or cellars of the apartment buildings in the city of Mariupol, which has been liberated from neo-Nazis, there were civilian bodies found with traces of brutal torture, and in those bodies, the neo-Nazi symbols and swastika were cut. This is the Izvestia, the report from one of the Russian newspapers. Besides, those civilians that have been rescued from the town have confirmed unheard of facts about how those neo-Nazis, meaning Ukrainian neo-Nazis, knowing that there were women and children in the basements or cellars, on purpose were throwing grenades on those children and women. Now, friends, I know you will say, well, why would this be? Well, why would this be? It'll be because it is a Russian-speaking city. It is because of the neo-Nazi hatred for the Russians. It is because the Ukrainian neo-Nazis hate anybody who is not Ukrainian, especially the Russians. And sadly, that kind of anti-Russian feelings are now so much present in the West. I'm totally ashamed of the British Isles and the British government. For years, you've been having Russian hatred propaganda. Well, what do you think? What do you think, that will not return to you as a boomerang? Oh, yes, it will. It will. According to the Bible prophecies, you British people, listen to me very carefully. You British people will be slammed with sanctions. The same sanctions they are now imposing on Russia, it will be slammed against you by the Germans. Oh, yes, because Germans never loved you, and you know that. But Germany is slowly but surely rising to world power, whether you like it or not. That's why, on the referendum, you left the European Union, because you realize it's now German-dominated. Well, indeed it is. And it is going to become even greater and economically more stronger. And then, when it becomes, then it will slam sanctions against you one of these days. And then you'll feel what it means to be a victim of Nazi ideology. And the same goes for America and the rest of the Anglo-Saxon world. It is shameful not only for you, but for other European countries, what kind of Nazism is now being born these days in Europe. I was wondering for years, because I knew the Bible prophecies and I knew that Europe, led by Germany, will one day lean to right and goes right into neo-Nazism. I was wondering, how could that happen and why? Well, now I see why. Because the hatred against the Russians, especially as displayed in Germany, the hatred against the Russians it's equal to Nazism of the 20th century. Because the Nazis hated not only the Russians, but the rest of the Slavic people as well. But the Russians, being the strongest of all the Slavs, of course, were especially targeted by the German Nazis. You ought to be ashamed, all of you who have bad feelings against the Russians, to the point that, I've heard that there is a hospital in Munich which refuses to treat Russians. How could you be? How dare you? And then I heard that today that the British are not going to allow the Serbian citizens in Britain to participate in our parliamentary elections, which will be held on April the 3rd. Why? Because Serbia didn't impose sanctions against the Russians. You hypocrites! You hypocrites in Europe. You impose sanctions while you don't dare to impose more sanctions because you depend on Russian gas. And so, well, what do you think? That small Serbia does not depend on Russian gas? Yes, it does. You protect your own citizens, by kind of having partial sanctions and looking after your own interests. But when it comes to Serbs, they have no rights. They should be obviously exterminated just like the Russians should be. How shame. Be ashamed, the Anglo-Saxon world, led by Britain and London. Be ashamed. You British government, be completely ashamed. And you know what? Again, I know what is written in the Bible. You don't, probably. Most of you British people don't, but I know what is written in the Bible. One of these days, and it's coming up in few years, you're going to feel the same sanctions and the same hatred by your supposed ally called Germany. And then hopefully, perhaps, some of you might repent of this anti-Russian hysteria, of this anti-Serbian hysteria. You've been spreading this anti-Russian hysteria for years and years and years. And for years, when Donald Trump was the president of the United States, one of the best presidents the United States ever had, you were always against him. You were always working against him. You were always standing with this poop president, Biden. What a shame on you, Britain. What has happened to you? What has happened to your dignity, Britain? Do you know who is Serbia? Serbs are the only East European ally to you in both world wars. Do you know that? No, of course. Most of you British have no clue because nobody taught you in your schools. Because your school system is completely warped up and useless. Just like it is in America, just like it is in Australia, just like it is in New Zealand. And how can you be so brainwashed? It just amazes me how brainwashed you can be to hate, not to and believe your media. Well, what do you think, that your media gives you the whole truth? Of course not. They give you half truths. And in this conflict with Russia, they give you half truths. In all of my recordings about this conflict, I've tried to present to you both sides, because Serbia is in good terms with both countries, both Russia and both Ukraine, With both countries we're in good terms and we receive news from both countries. Now, of course, is there propaganda and lies? Of course there is. But regardless of that, I just gave you always in my reports what the Russians said and what the Ukrainians said. And I'm amazed. That one of my friends, she thought it was very useful what I sent. She thought it was well balanced. She was accused of being part of Russian propaganda. Poor all of you who say that. What do you think? Especially you believers, you who are parts of the churches of God. I'm deeply I'm not ashamed. We should probably expect that. Because one of these days, yes, the Jesus Christ said that you will just, betray, then they will betray one another and give one another to, sure enough. I've got on my channel, on this channel, I've got 45 days before, that start the end, that begin the end, 45 days. I've got that message. I've given it several years ago because I knew that some of you within the churches of God would be betraying your own friends, your own relatives. But how one-sided you can be? How is it possible that you believe your media to the point that you would betray your brethren? Well, it is possible, obviously. Feel ashamed anyway. And I give my warm greetings to all of you, the rest, members of the churches of God, who are willing to at least show some doubt about the veracity of the news you've been receiving from your mainstream media. So back to Ukraine and Russia. No, those of you who hate Russia, let me tell you what the Bible says about Russia. Russia is going to be the head of the Euro-Asian basin, Euro-Asian bloc. Whether Putin will be the president of Russia or not, it doesn't really matter. Russia, as a nation, is going to be the leader, one of the world leaders, and there is no way that anyone could conquer Russia. Because God will not allow it. God will allow Russia to continue its own politics and strengthen the Asian bloc until the point comes when the Germans, once again, with its future leader who has been prophesied in the Bible, when Germans decide to attack Russia again, that will happen just prior to the return of Jesus Christ. They'll have one attack, then Russia will have a counterattack, and with the counterattack, woe to Germany and its allies. Because Joel chapter 2 describes the Asian disciplined army, composed of Chinese, Russians, and others, who are just going to make a counterattack on Europe, and they're going to basically devastate the European continent, or those who are basically allied in the Neo-Nazi formations against the Russians. But before that happens, before attacking Russia, Germany, as prophesied in the Bible, is first prophesied, particularly in the book of Ezekiel, and you have a whole series of my explanations here on my channel in the book of Ezekiel. The Germans will first impose economic sanctions on the Anglo-Saxon world, will weaken them from the outside, and then when the chaos begins inside, one of these days, Germans are just going to take over. Because they hate the fact that the Anglo-Saxons, British and Americans in particular, have conquered them twice in both world wars. Germans have never forgotten that. Oh yes, you Anglo-Saxons think that Germans are your allies. You cannot be more deceived. You cannot be more deceived, no. Germans are just acting very well as your ally. And at the same time they're concocting how to take revenge on you. And meanwhile you've been showing them your military facilities. Meanwhile you've been telling them how strong you are. The German intelligence keeps working day and night, gathering all the information about your strengths and your weaknesses and so on. And it's just a matter of time, matter of years, when you'll feel that neo-Nazi hatred on your own skin, as we say in Serbian, and then you might remember how much you hated Russians for no reason. For no reason, because Russians have never done any wrong to you British people. At least not that I know of. And in fact, because you're a monarchy, let me tell you that the Queen Elizabeth, the longest ruling queen on the throne of David, because the throne in London is the throne of David. Oh, just Google it out and find it out, and find out genealogy of Queen Elizabeth. It's all posted on the internet. So don't be stupid and don't live in stupidity. Find out the nature of the throne that rules over you, Britain. So, the longest ruling monarch in British history is the third cousin to the late Russian Tsar Nikolai. Did you know that? Did you know that? But your anti-Russian history, I'm sad that the Buckingham Palace, has never kind of intervened and asked your media, British media, to at least consider that the Russians have never done anything wrong to you, and that the Russian royal family is related to the British royal family. Oh well. How interesting. Yes, very interesting. But you don't even know that because you have been so stupidified with your shallow and empty education system, which is exactly the same everywhere else in the world. Now back to the city of Mariupol. I was telling you that I would be giving you update when the city of Mariupol falls into the Russian hands. I did haste a little bit. I made a haste, so I gave you already one update before the city fell into the Russian hands, because I felt that it was my duty, moral duty, to tell you that part of that city or the area around the city is already in the Russian hands, and that the land corridor has been established between the Russian populated areas. I felt that was my duty to give you as latest news, and to kind of prepare you for the fact that the city, as I've been telling you, will certainly fall into the Russian hands. Well, the city has fallen right now into the Russian hands. But I mentioned from this article from the evening news, Serbian daily evening news, that the head of the Miznicev, who was as I've seen, the head of the Center for Control of National Defense of the Russian Federation, Colonel General, or that would be, I guess, the rank in your English language. He's general anyway. General and Colonel, I would say. Well, he also says that, he also added that the Ukrainian forces within the town of Mariupol were still there, that they've been killing civilians. And the victims are old people and women, while the children, those who are very small children, have been subjected to a strong propaganda of evil ideology of Nazism, so that they would become the followers of Bandera. Stefan Bandera is the father of the Ukrainian and Nazism and Nazi ideology. He was a collaborator with German Nazis, and he is known for his forces that during the Second World War committed horrible massacre of the Jews, the Poles, and the Russians in western part of Ukraine. Also, the chief of the investigation committee of the Russian Federation, Alexander Bastrykin, has gave instructions that a brutal murder of the Russian prisoner of war, who was killed by the Ukrainian Nazi, be investigated. The notes that the investigators have so far discovered has shown that the Russian prisoner of war was beaten to death, and then he was killed by that Nazi. There was a video which leaked about Ukrainians shooting into Russian prisoners of war, shooting their kneecaps, beating them, even though the Russian prisoners of war did not have any resistance. So those of you who think that the Ukrainians are sweet and great, you have not seen some things, movies. The famous Oliver Stone made a movie about the rise of neo-Nazism in Ukraine, and you do have that movie available in English language. He's Oliver Stone, by the way, so he's not Alexander Velic. So you cannot say that Oliver Stone was one-sided and that he would side with one side. No. He gave a very nice documentary, he produced a very nice documentary movie about the rise of Nazism in Ukraine. And one of the branches of that Nazism, the Azov Battalion, was indeed and is still fortified in the city of Mariupol. In the city of Mariupol, yes. And it was just a matter of time, I think I told you in one of my previous recordings, that once the city of Mariupol falls into the Russian hands, we are going to discover what those neo-Nazis were doing within the city. And yes, so since now the Mariupol is in the hands of Russians, we're going to discover more and more. These are just preliminary news, I would say, and more details are going to come up. Now, of course, Ukrainians will be blaming Russians for besieging the city, but nevertheless, the Russians will have all the proofs of what the Ukrainian Nazis, neo-Nazis had done have done in that city. How they tortured and murdered civilians. I was afraid that was the case. I did not mention this before to you, but I was afraid that was the case because what else could you expect of neo-Nazis? What? You tell me, what can you expect of neo-Nazis? What do you expect them to love? Other nations? To love other races like Jews and Gypsies? To love other nations like, Russians? Of course not. But, I hope, and I want to say just for the end, those of you in the Churches of God, Church of God people, I hope at least you would not be naive to believe that only one party in this conflict is guilty, the Russians. And even less, I would expect you to hate any nations. Don't you remember what the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy? That the deceivers will deceive and will make great advances in the society, deceiving and being deceived. Well, they're deceivers. No, I'm not saying that Russians are innocent of anything. And I'm not saying that Russians are just angels. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the Russians were being provoked far too long, for 8 long years. Russia was being provoked by Ukraine. Russia was being provoked by NATO. Russia was being provoked by European Union. Russia has consistently been saying, please don't do that. There are red lines that you should not cross. Please do not, Russians have been enduring all kinds of provocations until they discovered that there was the plan by the Ukrainian central government to make this month, March, to make a storm into the Russian-speaking areas, Lugansk and Donetsk, and ethnically cleanse those areas. Meaning to murder all the Russians there. Russians discovered that, and Russians decided to intervene first and put an end to all this stupidity. And it was very clear that the Ukraine, sooner or later, was going to lose the war because Ukraine is not matched to the Russians. They can certainly resist for a while. They can provide all kinds of creative resistance, but the might is the might. So the Russians are inconquerable. They're inconquerable. You cannot, there is no force right now that can conquer them. And the Germans have realized that, so the budget for the German military has drastically been enlarged for the years to come. So, very soon, dear friends, we are going to see a mighty German army. Oh, sorry, no. Since Germany is the leader of Europe, we're going to see a mighty European army. You may ask me, or you may wonder, oh, so what is the role of that army? Well, let me tell you. The role, one of the prophecies to be fulfilled by that army is to destroy the Anglo-Saxon world. Sadly, that is the case. That's written in the Bible. So for all this anti-Russian hysteria and hatred to other nations, for all this anti-Serbian hysteria, for all any hysteria, for all the crimes committed in Iraq, for all the crimes committed around the world, the penalty will be paid dearly. According to the prophecies in Ezekiel chapter 6, chapter 5, only 10% of British and Americans will survive the coming Great Tribulation. I feel sorry for you British and Americans because you are the descendants of the tribes of Israel, of the biblical tribes of Israel, but you don't care about it. You don't care about your origin. You don't care about anything that has to do with spirituality in the Bible, but that's your choice. And because you have turned God again, you have turned your backs against your God, that God is still alive, He's still interested in you, as He will indeed bring certain punishments so that at least some of you would finally repent and return to your own God. But sadly, it will take German, or rather European, military to conquer you and to do to you what the German Nazis did to the Jews in the Second World War. And it's all prophesied in the Bible. Oh, yes, and it was confirmed in the New Testament by Jesus Christ in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. The Great Tribulation, that will be horrible, most horrible event ever in human history. Those things have been confirmed. And only when you lose everything, all of your material wealth, all of your military, all the things that you rely upon, and because you don't rely upon your God anymore, except for a few individuals here and there, only then when you lose everything, and when you experience such horrors, only then 10% of you would finally come out repentant and willing to return to God who has given you so much. He has given you much and more than He has given to any other nation on the face of the earth. In any case, dear friends, and thanks to all of you who have been following my audio reports and updates, now that the city of Mariupol has fallen into the Russian hands, I wanted to report that to you because your Western media will probably not say anything. I want to report to you there have been numerous crimes against the Russian civilians within the city of Mariupol committed by the Ukrainian and Neo-Nazis, because your Western media will probably not tell you anything about it. And hopefully when something so remarkable happens again, I'll make another recording for you so that you will be updated. Thank you for your attention. To all of you who believe in God and trust in God, may God bless you. Have no fear. This is not going to be the world conflict. The world conflict is going to start with troubles in the Middle East. This is East Europe, so it's not the conflict that will trigger the worldwide conflict. No. Be at peace. Don't worry. To those of you within the Church of God communities, sadly, you obviously don't understand the prophecies about the Laodiceans, and it seems to me that you do not understand how terribly you are going to betray your brethren and your friends, fellow believers who are still trying to be objective and have objective view of this sad world that is coming soon to an end. Until the next time, friends, stay well, may God be with you, and again, the strategic city of Mariupol has fallen into the Russian hands. It's being controlled by the Russians. There might be some pockets of resistance still within the city. However, as was the fear of those of us who knew that the Ukrainian central government forces were basically made up of neo-Nazis, it has been now confirmed and discovered that various civilians of the Mariupol were tortured by the neo-Nazis. You may ask yourself why? Well, because they're ethnic Russians.